Thank you, Katie. Good morning, everybody. So I'm Nina from the Consent Collective. And the Consent Collective is relatively new in Scotland. We've been up here, I think, about 18 months now. And Connect 3 have just been one of those organizations that have welcomed us with such open arms. And yeah, this is the first event we're doing together. I'm sure it won't be the last. As an organization, the Consent Collective, sexual harassment is all of our work is about that, and it always has been. My career as a psychologist has always focused on sexual harm, relationship abuse, and sexual harassment. It's a career that predates Me Too, so it's a career with a long road and lots of stories to tell. And I know we've also got a lot of friends and allies on the call too, and I know that some of you have been on that path with me. And I'm really, one of the things I want to share about today in this new act is I think this is also a moment of celebration too. Like, this is a good news story. This is about progress, and then what does that mean when that's implemented. So as someone who's been on this road for a long time, I kind of arriving today with a great deal of gratitude, a lot of hope, and also, because of that long road, quite a few things to say about, well, what does it mean to prevent sexual harassment, which I look forward to getting into at the moment, in a moment. But as an organisation, the Consent Collective, we work with lots of different types of organisations. We support rape crisis centres with the work that they do, providing training to their staff. We work a lot with universities, helping with preventing sexual harassment on campus, helping students understand consent, also supporting with responding to reports in terms of investigations. We have worked a lot with our criminal justice systems, training police officers and judges and barristers how to work in a way that's trauma informed. And of course, we've been working with workplaces. And I have to say, I have been thoroughly inspired by what is possible when an organization says, we want to do this, we want to do it properly, and they're willing to walk that path. It's been incredibly gratifying as someone who's been doing this work for a long time to have that opportunity. And so, yeah, I look forward to kind of sharing some of that today as well.
Amazing. Thank you, Nina. I can see that we've already got some comments coming in on the chat function, and please feel free to say good morning and tell us where you're coming from and things like that. So get used to using the chat function. Both Nina and I have said that when we're on these calls, we get right stuck into the conversations that we forget to look at the chat function. So again, that's why we've got Cynthia and Samantha on hand to help us manage the chat function. So please don't feel like we're ignoring any of your comments or questions, and we will certainly have a look through them after the call as well. But again, just that invite that if you do have something that you want to ask us, and one of us haven't picked up it on the chat function, if you can and you're able, come off mute and ask us, and or we will be sure to follow up with as many afterwards if we don't manage to cover it off today. But we will absolutely do our very best to do that for you all. So like I said, we're going to just get started with a little bit of interaction this morning using Slido. So hopefully this will be, yep, coming up on the screen here. And we've got the QR code there, or you can join at slido.com. And the joining code is 3713627. And if you can, and again, you're able, please do join us for a little bit of a word cloud. And the question that Nina and I want to explore with you this morning, just how are you feeling about the new act coming in this October? Okay, good. We start to see some interactions coming in. And again, the purpose of this for us is to really check in to see, what are some of the main themes, what are some of the main feelings, and hopefully by the end of today we can meet some of the expectations around about what you're thinking and feeling essentially. Great. So just keep that going for a few minutes. Just as some of these words are coming in there, is there any surprises or anything that's, yeah, surprises about what you're thinking, seeing some of these on the screen?
Yeah, I'm kind of I think my initial instinct was, oh yeah, we really must talk about the good news side of this as well, because I have a lot of sympathy for that. If this is landing on your desk and you're going to be responsible for this in your organization, I'm sure it probably can feel a bit overwhelming. It's a responsibility. So definitely, I hope we get into some content today where you feel like, okay, it is possible to do this, do it well,
Yeah.
and feeling into the positive side of it as well, whilst also holding the responsibility. But I can also see that there's other people who are feeling like me, that excited by the positive impact. And you know what, it's all of it. I'm feeling all of those things too. Like, I recognize all of them. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is that, the balance here of there is some positivity, like you said, and sharing some of the good things that can come from this, absolutely. And we'll get into the detail around about that as well. I really love that word hopeful. And I think again that takes me back to some of our conversations around about the why that we do the work that we do and why we support organisations and keeping our people safe across, because we are hopeful for a better future for people as well, and hopeful that we can build great workplaces and great working practices that really positively impact the people, as well as keeping our organisation safe. Um, yeah, good. We've got some confidence and sound reassured. Okay. Um, I'll stop sharing the screen, but I'll keep that active just in case anyone hasn't had the opportunity to contribute to the word cloud yet, but who wants to. So that will still be there. And we will share this as a bit of a download after the end of today. So we'll have some links and some tools, resources that we want to share with you, and we'll download this as well, for you as well. But for just now, I will stop sharing so that I can see everyone again back on the main screen. But yeah, thank you for joining in with a bit of interaction with us this morning. So, Nina, now that we've got a bit more awareness of what's on people's minds, how we're thinking and feeling, will we get into a bit of the detail around about the Act then, particularly then helping people feel a bit more clear or a bit more reassured about it? So, nice open question, I guess, to start us off. But Nina, can you tell us a bit more around about, what's new, or what is the Worker Protection Act that's coming in 24th of October?
26th of
26th.
October.
Oh,
And
I've got the 24th. It's my daughter's birthday on the 24th, and I've got that
okay.
stuck in my mind. She'll be pleased to know. Yes, 26. Perfect. Thanks, Nina.
Yeah, and so you'll be relieved to hear this is, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not going to pretend to be. So this is, not the legal interpretation and the legalese in terms of this act, but the kind of the big take home messages of what does this mean for your organization. And it means that, from the 26th of October, you have a positive duty to be preventing sexual harassment as an organization. So up to that point, it was be a good idea to try to prevent sexual harassment in your organization. I mean, if for no other reason that you want to do that for your staff, but also the things that you had done in order to prevent sexual harassment would be one of the ways that you might have offered a defense if you had gone to an employment tribunal. That would have been one of the ways of defending yourselves as an organization. But it was just used as a defense from October the 26th. You now have this positive duty, this expectation that this is something you're going to be proactively doing, regardless of whether or not you're being taken to an employment tribunal. I guess in terms of who's enforcing this act, it's going to be employment tribunals. So now when the act comes in, if you are taken to an employment tribunal and they find against you and they find that you haven't been preventing sexual harassment, then you're going to be facing up to a 25% increase in terms of the kind of compensation payouts. But it's also this is also about the Equality and Human Rights Commission. So they can also they also be enforcing this. They can also investigate. They can also take a look at the case if it's gone to employment tribunal. And I guess the take home from the Equality and Human Rights Commission, I think with this act, so every organization needs to be thinking, what am I actively doing to prevent sexual harassment from happening in the first place? And then I guess if you are a larger organization, if you have a lot of resource, I guess the burden of expectation in terms of the depth of the work that you should be doing will be that much higher, because for you it won't be taken as a kind of reasonable that you haven't done something, because it would cost, 3 times your turnover in a year. So that's those are the big take home messages. You now have a positive duty to be preventing sexual harassment. You need to be doing something about this. And then, of course, if you don't, then there are consequences, and they're not just financial. I think for a lot of organizations, this is also about reputational risk, that you have been failing in a duty that you have as an employer. Shall I go into some of the kind of flesh out some of the, what does this mean in terms of for an organization? What kinds of things should you be doing?
Yeah, absolutely, Nina. I think because for us from a Connect 3 perspective, knowing that the act is coming in, and that's been what's on our mind is what does that reasonable steps look like for different types of organization, different sizes of organization.
Yeah.
And really that's us trying to think about, us as a business, how do we make sure that we're following the right steps and doing the right things, and actually so we can demonstrate that these reasonable steps are reflective, and not just doing the bare minimum either. From our point of view, it's right, what would be the reasonable steps, and actually with the resources and that we have, what does that look like? And yeah, what are some of the things? So I think that'd be a great opportunity to share. And for me, then that would help reflect back on some of our plans that we've had at Connect 3 as well.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the thing, and this is something that every business should be doing, like regardless of your size, is a huge part of this is risk assessment. So this is really a health and safety conversation. A sexual harasser, a potential sexual harasser, is a potential risk in the workplace, a risk that can cause physical and psychological harm. So for every organization, it's there needs to be a process of risk assessment, thinking of quite detailed, like thinking about your industry. Is your industry a historically male dominated industry? Like, is that part of the context? Thinking about where your people work, where do they have to go in order to go about their jobs? Are they working offsite? Are they working from home? Are they having interactions with customers, clients, suppliers, students, patients, guests? So all of these, all of that is a different exposure to different types of risk. Are they going to conferences? Are you sending them away on business? Where are they going? And also thinking about alcohol. Is alcohol part of their job? Are they working in hospitality? Or is it more recognizing that your work Christmas party is a situation where alcohol is involved? So yeah, thinking about these things that we know are higher risk for sexual harassment and the degree to which that's part of their working environment. Also thinking about individuals who might be at elevated risk of sexual harassment within your workplace and your industry, new members of staff. Do you work in an industry where one individual is able to hold an awful lot of power over junior members? That again, that opens up the doors to abuse of power. So it's something to be thinking about. Something else as well is also, if you think about your cases that you've had in the past, like if you've had cases in the past, you also need to be monitoring those cases. If you found that somebody had been sexually harassing a colleague, that person is now a known risk. And it's like, what are you doing to just monitor that risk? And will you be able to demonstrate that you've mitigated that risk as much as possible? So it's quite involved, but there are processes in which you can do this. Like, you're all also having to think about the risk of fire and things like this in the workplace. This is just kind of getting used to a new type of risk, and exactly the same as the others. Let's identify them. Let's think about, well, what can be done to mitigate those things, and then what is reasonable in terms of that mitigation, and then to monitor that as you go along. But this is bigger than just health and safety. Let me just kind of paint a picture of some of the other things that this touches on. One actually is sales. If you think about it, you as an employer are trying to protect your staff as they go about their work. And if you're sending them into other people's workplaces, then you need to be asking questions about those workplaces. So I suspect that increasingly we're going to find that when you're kind of tendering for work, one of the questions you're going to be asked is effectively, is your environment a safe environment for us to be sending our people into? Because we're trying to kind of monitor that and show that we are monitoring that too. I think also recruitment and retention, you know what, the story about retention when it comes to sexual harassment for far too long has been losing staff. You know, it's been about people leaving industries, leaving workplaces because that prevention piece hasn't been done, and then the responses when people report haven't been adequate. There is a whole other story to tell here, and it's one that I'm really excited to start hearing about, which is where you become an employer of choice. Because in this male dominated industry, you're the employer that does this really well. And you're the employer that is tapping into a type of workplace loyalty that I don't think we've, you know, really got curious about enough. In every single workplace, I can assure you there are a significant number of people who have lived experience of different types of sexual harm, relationship abuse, and sexual harassment in the workplace. If you can show them that you can hold that you can be a safe environment, when you say bring your whole self to work, you mean you don't need to talk about that here, but that part of you here is also safe. Then I think, you know, there's loads to be talked about in terms of retention, especially for those kind of STEM kind of industries where attracting and retaining women into the workplace is such an important conversation. It also touches on well-being. If you're going to start to raise these conversations in your workplace, you need to be thinking, well, are the well-being resources that we've got adequate for this? Can we hold a training on preventing sexual harassment and then say, well, if you need support after this, here's the resource, and is it up to the job of holding that? And then I guess the big story is really about your workplace culture. And I would highly recommend making this about your workplace culture, because that's really where the work is. And for too long, sexual harassers have been able to use that workplace culture to their advantage in too many situations, to be operating in an environment where people readily dismiss what they're doing or laugh it off and these kinds of things. And this is really, the work is really to twist that around and use your culture as one of the key tools in preventing workplace sexual harassment. And that, of course, really touches on diversity and inclusion, which I'm sure you're aware of, Katy. Like, not only are your members of staff who, in terms of their protected characteristics, like they will be at elevated risk. That, you know, there's lots of intersectionality here as well. So lots of harassment around race can also have a sexual harassment tone to it as well. So these things intersect. So there's really a lot of thinking to be done in terms of diversity and inclusion when it comes to this conversation. And again, if we do the work well, there's a positive ripple effect for all of those conversations too. Katy, I'm curious, because you're obviously heavily invested in diversity and inclusion conversations. Have you framed this act in that way?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that exactly like you described with the intersectionality approach, that, you know, we know from research, we know from people's previous and lived experience around about how their identities can compound. And unfortunately, that leads to that other people being more vulnerable, or, you know, and it can do. And we have been, you know, really focused in terms of our internal culture at Connect 3, and then the work that I do supporting culture, build that culture of inclusion. And like you talked about, Nina, making sure that the right behaviours are in place to mitigate risk for people. Because that can't and shouldn't just sit with one person within an organisation. And again, typically, you know, we see the EDI falls to HR or the people team to lead on and own, but actually it's about everyone and how do they behave and what is the conversations, what are the interactions like within the workplace. And just listen to there, because this act, it does have such a breadth to it. And for me, it's helping thinking about and reflecting on our organisational culture. And at Connect 3, as an example, we really pride ourselves on the culture of inclusion that we've created, on psychological safety. We've got our values and our behaviours that sit behind that, you know, we hope and we're trying to build that means that people can speak up and speak out, and we're aware of our behaviour. But we can't just rely on that when this act comes into force. So we find a lot of, organisations, it's, oh, we don't have a problem here, or our culture's great. And it's sometimes them broad and sweeping statements, and we're not saying the culture isn't great, but equally we need to do that work to identify what some of the risks may be. Because actually, just because our experience of how we access our culture and access our work is great, it's good for us, doesn't mean that every single person is experiencing that. And again, we layer the lens of ED&I and intersectionality. Actually, how are we listening to people and how are we enabling people to be able to speak up and share if something has happened to them? So I think that's me. It's not resting on the fact that we think we've got good company cultures. Actually, we need to do the work to identify actually what makes our cultures great, and are we putting things in place that helps people to speak up, speak out. Um, but beyond that, it's that awareness of our behaviours, because how often, and again, sorry if this is triggering, and or you've had lived experience, and or people that you love and care for has had lived experience, but actually the stats are there, and it's so stark of how many people have experienced that even in today's workplace. And it's really making, we mask this as banter or as just having a joke, or, well, I didn't think you'd think anything of it. And sometimes people aren't aware of the actual behaviors of what they do, and the impact that that has on other people. So for me, it's about how can we raise that awareness of people's actions and how that intention lies with people.
Yeah, I think this is really a skills conversation, and I would like highly recommend that that's the approach you take as an organization, to not do this superficially. So to present the information and point people to reporting process, I would really recommend that you invest in your people, and you invest in their skills around this, for so many reasons. One being, in terms of what kind of sexual harassment happens in the workplace, we need to recognize there's a whole spectrum. And that spectrum raises from people who had absolutely no intention to cause harm. However, the impact of their behavior, the impact of the things that they said was harmful, all the way up to and including people with every intention of causing harm, and are hoping to get away with it. And to prevent, you need to be thinking of that entire spectrum. Now, the unintentional stuff is preventable but it's a skill. And it isn't just a skill with the person who's causing the harm. This is why it's a culture conversation. The kind of the space to work to is a workplace culture where the giving and receiving of feedback is a pretty normalized thing to do. A little bit of, hey, I heard you use that language. It didn't land very well with me. Do you want to talk about it? And just to have that conversation there, because some of this sexual harassment continues because people aren't getting feedback about their behavior. And I would imagine even more so if they're slightly senior up the company. But we need to create a culture where that feedback is getting to those individuals. And, it is such a generous thing it's painful when people will be possibly defensive. This is why it is a skill to receive feedback as well as to give it. But what an investment in that person, because they're causing harm they've absolutely no intention of, and they need to get some feedback so that they can meet our modern expectations of what it means to be a professional in the workplace. And so the skills piece is really important. What's going to happen if we don't invest in that, if we don't invest in upskilling people so that they feel like they could have that conversation with their colleague, and upskilling our HR department so they feel like they could have that conversation with the people involved? If we don't feel skilled, we escalate. So if I witness something in the workplace and I think, oh, I don't have the skills to do this, I'm going to go tell a manager. If that manager says, oh, well, I don't have the skills to do this, they're going to get at HR. If HR thinks I don't have the skills to do this, before you know it, you're going to be, commissioning a lawyer to do an independent investigation, spending thousands of pounds, and all potentially for a situation that could have been dealt with. Yeah. And this is what I want the sexual harassment that's preventable, let's prevent it. The people who need feedback, let's give them that feedback. And then let's also create an environment where those people who mean to cause harm, we create an environment where it's impossible for them to hide. But that's what the work is. The joy and the benefits of if you take that approach to this work is you also get this ripple effect of creating that culture, like that culture where, because if we get good at giving and receiving feedback, we're not just talking about sexual harassment anymore. We're talking about disability and neurodiversity, ethnicity. We're talking about being able to invest in each other. We're actually talking about being trustworthy. And we're also talking about dignity in the workplace, like to be an environment where it is safe enough to have these vulnerable conversations. Like those are the environments that offer psychological safety. It is not about no harm ever happens here. It is about we have the skills to be able to hold these situations as and when they arise. Like that's what we're working towards. And the positive ripple effect, like when you can be that colleague who is able to really appropriately hold a situation as it's happening, if you can be that manager who's able to manage it, who's able to make all parties involved feel heard, nobody's dignity is being violated, and to feel like we can actually work through this where that is appropriate. And then where it's not appropriate is escalated in the right way, then you really are that culture. So if you are a people first organization, this is really an invitation to walk the talk and to get the skills. And I'm excited for the organizations that really can do that.
And it's amazing, isn't it, that, quite often we talk about feedback as a skill within workplaces and we talk about giving and receiving and we do training courses, but it's more related to people's performance, related to the tasks that they're working on and how well they're completing things, without actually thinking about that more holistic view of giving and receiving feedback. In this manner, and actually really helping people understand that impact again that they're having. And, so often things can be nipped in the bud, if you like, of just having that initial conversation. But you're right, it then needs the right skills and the behaviors to, accept that. And also to, be aware if you're overhearing comments that make you and or other people feel uncomfortable as well, and being able to raise that and have the right conversations in the right way to help that person receive it. But then equally, that person needs to do the learning. So actually not
Yeah.
repeating the same mistakes and that same behavior again and again, because then again, that would then need to be escalated.
Yeah, totally. It's the safe workplace culture is one where we have these skills, where we can have these vulnerable conversations. And it is about creating a space where we don't underreact when these things happen. So we don't minimize it, laugh it off, dismiss it. We kind of do hold people to account for the things that they've done that are causing harm, but at the same time, we're not overreacting.
Yeah.
And I guess that would be, when we create a culture where, again, where people don't feel skilled, that escalation, it becomes an overreaction. It is an overreaction to get a lawyer involved when there was a conversation that was had when someone really, at the end of the day, that needed managing, that needed some feedback giving. But when everything gets escalated, that is going to create a culture where there's a lot of fear, because if you make a mistake, it might end up in this massive process coming into play instead of someone sitting down with you and having a conversation with you. And I guess it's about understanding that we can be absolutely robust in our determination to create workplaces where sexual harassment is prevented to the degree that we're able to. Like we can be totally robust, but we can also have some compassion for this work too. Like we need to be able to do both. We need to be able to give people feedback, hold them to account, monitor that to see if they are, making changes that we want to see. And then we also need to have the system where, the people who are the higher risks, the people who are intending to cause harm, that we can be confident that we can be able to identify those. And all of that does rest on this phrase we like to use, which, the psychological safe environment. And that means safe for everybody. That's what we need to be working towards. And the good news is it's totally possible. And the good news is if you're able to do that as an organization, you really are, whatever your values are, you're really living them.
Amazing. And again, it's just fundamentals, isn't it, of, a workplace culture, but just really understanding the difference that that can make. And I know we've touched on some of the implications of the Act, Nina, of that it is that reputational damage. We've got then it's a 25% increase, which could be pretty damaging for organisations, particularly kind of SMEs and smaller organisations. But more than that, it's a people. People are impacted and affected. So actually, if we can really change that landscape for the people, then we're really making a difference in terms of the culture. Let me give you a couple of other things that we have been considering at Connect 3, just to check in of, the next steps, the planning and things that people really should be thinking about. And then we can start to look at opening up to the questions. I know we've got some in the chat. So we touched on, that very much this is skills and it's learned skills. And it's been on our radar as part of the Act is round about that reskilling, upskilling through training and looking at that from everyone as part of our organisation, but then those that do have management and leadership roles within the organisation, having almost like a separate session just to look at the differences of how do they really enable and hold a conversation with people and what would be the next steps of how they would handle that. So really supporting our people within the team about that training and awareness. You talked a good bit around about risk assessments and again how what we should be aware of as part of the risk assessment. And I know that one thing for us is round about really and re-looking at our policies. So in particular, our bullying, our harassment policy, code of conduct, just to make sure that the language is really explicit and being able to make sure that everyone knows where they're at, where they're held, and what do they actually mean in terms of these day-to-day behaviours. So I guess that's some of the things that we've had on our mind. And you touched on this, Nina, but a big consideration for us as an organisation that I know that would affect many is round about, again, we host events, we welcome people to our offices from other organisations, we go out and visit client offices. So it's just around about for us that what is that reasonable step? So how can we, really support our people when they're in another organisation that we don't necessarily have control over what they've done with their policies or their risk assessments? Is there any insight or advice on that?
Yeah, definitely. You can get curious about, so do you have already with your clients and your suppliers an agreement, like a code of conduct agreement that is mutual between both organizations? I think it is about having these kind of formalized understanding of, when our people come into your place to go and do their job, whether they're providing a service or you're providing the service, that they're going to be treated in this way, and just to make sure that that becomes part of the process of how these relationships are happening. I think it's also about making sure that when you do that training, that this is covered and covered for your people. So, where are you sending them? I think for junior people, I think it's also about helping them realize that their expectations. I think if you're junior and you're with a big client, you might feel that you're supposed to kind of put up with these things. And so really clear messaging that, no, we mean by anybody. We mean by customers, clients, and yes, super important customers too. Like, this is what your expectations should be. Giving them some advice in terms of, you can empower people, like the kinds of things that you can do. So for example, I've already mentioned that alcohol can too often be part of the problem, like it's an ingredient. So say you're at a conference. So say you're sending somebody to a conference. First of all, you can find out what that conference's policy is. Like, what is the conference organizer doing to make this an environment where harassment is less likely to happen? But also, who is a resource should you find yourself in a situation where you're feeling uncomfortable? And for me, it's like wherever you are, you're invariably in somebody's workplace. So go and talk to the people who work there. Like, go and talk to the bar staff if that's the environment that you're in. But go and talk to somebody who's working right now. Find them, because they should have a policy. They should have a process that is there to help you. So I guess it's about some of the knowledge that needs to be shared too is also about getting people to think about risk as well for themselves. I don't mean to protect themselves. I just mean to have awareness, and awareness of what you can do, and also maybe agreeing that you always go in twos to this place, or we check in with you afterwards. Like, there are lots of ways to mitigate these risks that are not going to cost you a fortune. It's about thinking about it and having a plan. And then when we think about it and we have a plan, That's the process we need to go through for, all of these different things that we might be doing.
And yeah, and again, for me, I think that that's around about what we can control and put in place as an organization to make sure that people, again, are aware and also we're protecting, but almost by asking these questions of conferences or who we're going to, it's that role modeling piece. We're almost
Yeah,
saying this is too important to our staff. We need to ask these questions about what their experience is going to be like. So we're almost then role modeling that other people can and should be doing that as well. So it's using
totally,
our organizations as that great ripple effect
totally.
to help other people,
As a
emulate.
business to business conversation, it should be a simple one because we're both required to do this. So
Yeah.
let's have that conversation to do it. What are your policies? What are ours? What's our agreement here? Great, because we both need this, regardless of what the dynamic is.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Nina. And again, just before I go into the chat function, we touched on this, but who does this sit with, or who should it sit with within an organization?
I guess that will vary from organization to organization. I suspect a lot of people on the call are from HR. But this should sit everywhere. Certainly not one department can do this and do it to the degree that it needs to be done. This is absolutely a health and safety conversation. If you're a huge organization, this is a security conversation. This is about your customer relationships. It's about all of your employee relationships. It's about well-being. It's diversity and inclusion. It's culture. So it should be all of those things. I think if you are arriving, I imagine a lot of people, it will start in HR, but it needs to spread from there. But in terms of that HR team, I also think part of understanding this moment, I said that we work a lot in universities. I think what has happened in universities is going to start to happen in the workplace too. So what has happened in universities is not all universities now, but universities, I would say, are slightly ahead of most workplaces when it comes to having systems and things in place because they've been obliged to for a few more years. And what's happening there is you now have teams. A lot of universities have whole teams, and this is what they hold, and this is what they look after. They're specialists. They are responding to cases, holding cases. They're doing the prevention work. And I think within HR as an industry, we are going to see a growing specialism that is this people who have had more advanced training on how to investigate. They understand what it means to work in a way that's trauma informed. They are very equipped in terms of doing risk assessments and stuff. So people who have this specialist skill. And I think part of the work over the next few years is going to be about growing and nurturing the first wave of those specialists, because I think is also part of this context is also understanding this is just the direction of travel. So the Worker Protection Act has not come at us from left field. Like this is part of a growing momentum that's coming from all sorts of different directions. We've got a new generation of people coming into the workplace. They have really high expectations in terms of how they're treated in the workplace in terms of their dignity and respect. They're being very vocal on our university campuses when those expectations are not met. So we need to be aware that that's all coming. We've got a Labour government now. I would anticipate if there's going to be any changes in terms of legislation, it's going to be more of this, not less of this. And this is all just part of a good news story of, the modern workplace. We expect people to bring the best of themselves. We want them to thrive because for their own sake, and also because we want our organization to thrive. And we understand that people need to feel safe. They need to feel that their dignity is not being violated, so that they can bring everything that they've got to bear in terms of their role. And so I think, there's just going to be more of this, which is a good news story, but it doesn't mean we have to do the work.
Absolutely. And I'm just picking up something from Lizzie in the chat there around about, how can we convince line managers that they need upskilled? And, again, we're talking specifically about the Act today, but it's not dissimilar to, when we go in and we say, right, look at EDI work or culture work or anything that isn't directly related to the bottom line, it can be hard to influence and to kind of get people on board. And I guess that's where some of the celebration of the act in itself, because it's almost forcing people's hands because we have to
Yeah.
demonstrate. And in a way, going back to what you said at the start, Nina, we wanted to be doing this work anyway. We want workplaces to be free from sexual harassment, but actually with the act coming in to force, it is forcing a hand, but actually just thinking about the greatness that can come from that, with that awareness, that training, that upskilling, and ultimately the impact that that's going to have on people. So yeah, it's almost again forcing a hand. But and Nina, I know that you and Cynthia have done some great work with an organisation, and Lizzie was just asking for an example of how we've turned an organisation around in terms of trying to influence them to do the work so it is culturally embedded. Do you want to give an example of that?
Yeah, you know what? People are going to approach this from all sorts of different angles. So some organizations, it will be, we have just had or we are having a huge problem, like a big case, and it is brought to our attention that we need to do this. And that will be their entry. Other organizations, I guess the motivation to do it will be, well, there's this act and we're obliged to, so let's get on with it. Other organizations, I mean, certainly one of the organizations we're working with, it's come straight from the top. This is the kind of organization we want to be. We're going to do it. We're going to lead in our industry, and we want to do it properly. And it kind of doesn't matter which your entry level is. The work is the same. And I think if the work is done well, I mean, my whole career, I feel like I've been a tap dancer actually my whole life, because I'm often addressing groups of people, and I never assume everybody in the group is delighted that you got a psychologist talking about sexual harassment today. Maybe one or two people, probably the person who commissioned you, but there is a way of having these conversations where there's a lot for all of us to gain, and from doing this work and doing this work well. And I think it's about really thinking about what the tone needs to be for your organization, what's going to resonate, because in some organizations saying we're people first and this is about our culture, this is about diversity and inclusion, that's going to be the message that resonates. In other organizations, the way you might go is, this is a health and safety requirement, and health and safety is really important here because we work in construction, and this is as important as all of that other health and safety stuff. So I guess it's about, there are lots of different ways in which organizations will arrive at doing the work.
Yeah.
And I guess it's about framing it. If you feel like you're having to get buy-in, it's about framing it and thinking about what's going to resonate here. I think it's really useful to go with the energy that is already there, rather than trying to get people to see the world from your point of view. So what are they already interested in, motivated by? Is it going to be the sales conversation? Is it going to be like, we could be ahead of the game. We can show that we've got this completely covered, and we're therefore the safe conference to send your people to, because we are signaling very easily that this is something we've got under control.
Yeah, and I love that, Nina, rather than, helping or getting people to see it from your eyes, because that just might not exist at the moment. So yeah, just understanding. And I guess that's where the risk assessment comes in, as well as one of the first steps to understand what might be the reasonable steps, because there's obviously people here from different sizes of organizations that have access to different resource. And if a worry is around about, well, how much is this going to cost? And I don't have that finance to attribute, then, thinking really creatively around about how we can make sure that you're meeting the requirements that really do create that impact. And again, we'll kind of cover over some support that would be available and what that might look like, and some of the links and things like that. But yeah, I think let's add. I hope that answers your question, but please do yeah, perfect. Lovely. Does anyone want to come off mute at all, to ask any of the questions live to Nina or myself? We can check the chat function again, Cynthia and Sam, just if there's anything that's came within there that we've not picked up. But we've got about 5 minutes for Q&A just before Nina shares some support information on what we've been talking about today.
I'm curious to know if the those of you who are arriving unsure or a bit overwhelmed, if we turn the volume up on that or down on that, with the caveat, we do have some information to share in terms of how you can be supported on this journey at the end.
Oh, lovely. I've got a question coming in. So, yep, Sam, thank you for that. I will just read it out, Nina, and let's see what we want to say. We have a huge contractor workforce who work with our clients. Is there anything specific around extension to them that you can shine a light on?
In terms of how you navigate that relationship and keeping your people safe. Sorry, have I understood that correctly?
Hi Nina,
Annabelle.
it was from me.
Hi,
Hello.
Annabelle.
Yes, yeah. So it's our contractor workforce that go and work for our clients.
Yeah.
The legal relationship is actually with us because the contract, if you like, is with us. So we are essentially sort of sending them out to work within our client businesses. Most of the time they would be on site and working there. So is there some sort of, I mean, we have that sort of duty of care towards them. So does the act actually sort of extend out that we would need to make sure that we are building that sort of extra, which is another 6,000 people into what we're doing, on top of our 450
Yeah, so this is
staff.
the non-lawyer answer to that question. My understanding of who counts though as employed by you is very broad. Volunteers,
Fine.
trustees, contractors, so
Yeah.
it's broad. So
Okay.
I really think you need to be exercising some curiosity into what those existing arrangements are and are they adequate. And I guess it's also a lot of this, because it is health and safety, it's about monitoring as well, keeping an eye on things too. And I guess if you're also seeking feedback, I think a big part of this is going to be seeking feedback, giving people opportunities to report to you that are beyond making a report of sexual harassment, but giving you feedback about how well things are going. I guess you would also be extending that to that much wider group as well. Yeah, but do get legal advice. Not from a psychologist.
Amazing. Thanks, Nina. Another couple of questions. So one here we've got thinking about home workers. Where would an employer's liability extend to, and if an employee lived with someone who was abusive?
Yeah, so again, that does feel like a question for a lawyer because is that domestic violence? Is that workplace sexual harassment? That's definitely something you need to be looking at for this. If you're asking people to work from home or giving them the option to, that is absolutely something that should be considered, as well as the types of sexual harassment that can happen in these online environments as well. So yeah, all of like it's good to kind of hear these questions going because like that muscle, that's exactly the muscle that we need to be exercising, getting curious, thinking about all these things. Like, yeah, just because someone's working from home, that doesn't mean that they can't experience sexual harassment whilst they're going about their work. So you're thinking about everything to do with that. But I don't know how this intersects with domestic violence. No, as a psychologist, I can answer it, but not in terms of your legal position for that.
Yeah, and I think that definitely, like you said, round about these are the type of questions, and specifically looking at the risk assessment element of that is, where are your people working? Is it, again, are they in an office space? Are they at home? Are they going out to clients? Like any number of these, and that might be all for an organization. So again,
Yeah.
looking at some of the specifics of where people are working and therefore, what are the risks that's involved within that?
Yeah, and we're going to be holding a webinar with a legal colleague. We haven't advertised it yet, but you have an opportunity to sign up to a mailing list at the end of this if you want to be aware of when that is taking place.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks. And I think that that's a really good one for people to join as a follow-up as well, to look at some of the legal aspects as well.
But I have to say, having had lots of conversations with lots of lawyers about this, I guess we always end up at the same place, which is, yes, you have to have all of this in place, like policies, you need to think about this, but at the end of the day, you need to live this work. Like doing that skills piece, having that culture, that's like the safest thing you can do in terms of next steps for your organization. Unfortunately, you can't policy your way out of this one. You're going to have to kind of live and breathe it.
Brilliant. And hi, Marianne. Marianne's popped in a response on the chat function as well for that question that Wendy posed. So yeah, please do go and have a look at the chat from Marianne as well. Tracy's asked a question round about training. So what types of training have people found most valuable to organisations? But I'm wondering if we share a couple of your slides, Nina, and that
Yeah,
might then answer Tracy's question. But, you know, she's kind of saying, I appreciate needs are different, but great to hear different perspectives round about what would the specific training be. And Tracy, absolutely, if we've not managed to give you insight into that by the time that Nina's shared, we will recheck in with you, okay? But for the
yeah.
last kind of few minutes or so, Nina, do you want to share your slides?
Yeah, I guess I kind of doing this also from a sense of like if hearing more about the act has made you like raised your pulse levels in terms of okay, this is big. I just want to share some of the ways in which we're supporting organizations to do this because everything that we've said today, like it's possible to do this work. And to do this work on different levels of budget as well. I would say this is a moment to, I think the more that you do invest, invest doesn't necessarily mean money, it can also mean time, but invest in your people. Like I feel like the path ahead is one where you have the in-house skills as much as possible. But you're going to have to do invest in order to get those skills. I'm going to invite Cynthia to put a link to our website and the workplace element of it, please, Cyn, where you can find details of the training that we offer. So we've got an active bystander course, which is that piece. It's like giving people the knowledge and the skills to step in and to you know, if they witness something to do something about it, and so that's an online course that you can use. We're in the process of working on a more of a train the trainer model. If you want to deliver the stuff in-house but you haven't got the skills to do that yet, we're working on getting something, because I think if you deliver training, if you want to do this yourself, I'm not saying don't do that, do it, but it's just that you need to create an environment where you can handle any question that comes your way. You need to be comfortable hearing a disclosure. You need to be comfortable if something comes up about a case that you weren't aware of. So it's quite a lot to ask an internal person to hold. Therefore, I would invest a lot in those people before asking them to do that, because that is quite a lot, but it's possible. But also I want to share another resource with you, and you're the first group that we've shared this with. So perhaps you could do a little drum roll on your own desks whilst I queue up my screen, because at the Consent Collective, we've been thinking about what is our role in this moment, because we really want, there's going to be a lot of energy around the Worker Protection Act, and we are so desperately keen that that energy is turned into good practice and meaningful change. Like we want this to actually translate into really preventing sexual harassment. So I'm just going to share a new project with you all. Here it is. It's a project. It's called Harassment Free Workplace, and this is the bit that, you know, I'm really excited about. We get to be the generation, you know, if you're in a position of influence in your organization, part of your legacy can be this moment. We have the awareness, we have the knowledge, we have the skills to really make meaningful strides in terms of preventing sexual harassment. And so Harassment Free Workplace is a membership scheme. So an organization can join, and it's a membership scheme with an accreditation process. So the whole purpose of the project is to drive and celebrate good practice in the prevention of workplace sexual harassment. We're going to have 3 levels of membership. So you can enter at the committed stage. And if you do that, then you'll get some resources from us that will help you step towards our second stage, which is you've gone through an accreditation process with us. So that would be a process where we have a panel of judges, and they will review your organization. And if you're successful through that process, then you'll have that accreditation status. It would be a way of showcasing to your customers, clients, suppliers, guests that you're meeting current good practice standards when it comes to this work. And we're also going to have a third level, which is our industry leaders, for the organizations that really, they don't just want to do the work, they want to push the boundary of what's possible internally. or they actually want to push the boundary in terms of their industry. They want to lead in terms of getting their industry to be free of sexual harassment. And I think this is the really big line. For me, the Worker Protection Act is great. It's a really important ingredient. We completely welcome it. I think the huge invitation is to really be, as a generation, we're holding so many things, but we have the opportunity to do this, to be the generation where we create the changes so that these industries where far too much sexual harassment has historically happened and is still happening today, where that is a thing of the past, where we get this down to the much smaller parts of sexual harassment that can't be prevented. That's always been my mission, to just really, all of the stuff that's preventable, let's prevent it. So this membership is going to be opening soon, and if there isn't already, there'll be a link in the chat to take you to this website if you'd like your organization to be aware of this project as we develop, and we'll be opening up to our first cohort of members over the next couple of months or so. If you register your interest, then you'll be part of the journey and you'll get notified as and when things progress. But yeah, that's a new project from the Consent Collective, which we are very excited to share with you today. So I hope that you did do a drum roll for us.
We did. I certainly did. Very exciting. Lovely. Thank you, Nina. Really important to be able to share that follow-up support that's available to people. And I know that Sam's going to send some links within the chat function, and we'll follow up with the email because I know a couple of people have had to jump off. But thank you so much for joining us today. We're absolutely delighted to be able to support organisations and help you feel more prepared. So if you do have any questions for myself at Connect 3 or Nina at Consent Collective, then please reach out, but we will send and follow up with some links. But yeah, we will be hanging about for a few minutes or so. We'll stop the recording, and yeah, thank you for joining us.